This is the Gravastar Mercury X Pro. It's a lightweight wireless gaming mouse that I've been using as my main for almost a month now. But is it worth it? Let's find that out. But before we get into the video, I do want to mention that this mouse was sent out to me by Gravastar, but I'm not being paid, and every opinion given is mine and mine alone. So without further ado, let's get into the unboxing. So the first thing you'll see when opening the box is the mouse itself. After pulling up the piece of plastic that the mouse sits on, under it you'll see a cardboard box. Inside the cardboard box are a few accessories, like the manual, some extra grips and skates for the mouse, an actually pretty long USB-C to USB-A cable, and the 2.4 GHz dongle. Now with all that out of the way, let's get into the mouse itself. If you've never heard of Gravastar before, all their peripherals have an extremely unique look to them, and this mouse is no different. The body of the Mercury X Pro has this really cool alien looking skeleton design unlike any other mouse that I've ever seen. The outer shell is made from magnesium alloy, making it super durable with zero creaking or flex to it. With the durability and material that the mouse is made from, you may be wondering what the weight of this thing is. Coming in at an unbelievable 49 grams, this might be the lightest wireless gaming mouse on the market, comparatively to some of the most popular lightweight mice like the Logitech G Pro X Superlight or the Aerox 3 Wireless. This mouse is noticeably lighter than both of those, being almost 20 grams lighter than the Aerox 3 and 17 grams lighter than the Superlight. The extremely lightweight feel to the Mercury X Pro can make your aiming a lot more precise, but considering just how light this mouse actually is, if you're coming from a normal wireless mouse that isn't considered lightweight, or honestly, even if it's considered lightweight, this will probably take a bit of getting used to. The overall shape of the Mercury X Pro is on the larger side with a higher arch, which at its highest point is 40.5 millimeters. The sides of the mouse continue with the very holy look, which surprisingly I can't feel under my fingers when using it. For me personally, I do wish it kind of cradled my thumb a little bit more for better grip, but overall it's a very comfortable mouse. And for reference, I use a mix of fingertip and claw. Speaking of where your thumb rests, on the left side of the mouse are two programmable buttons, which can be very useful and bind it to anything in games. By default, they'll bring you forward and back a page in your browser. But in the Gravastar software, you can customize both buttons to be almost anything you'd want, like scrolling up or down, a media input, any other input on the mouse, or even a custom macro. The buttons themselves are in a really comfortable position and are pretty big, so it would be pretty hard to miss them when you're trying to click them. They're also really clicky and aren't mushy at all, which is also a plus. With the shell of the mouse being so open, it also reduces your palms from getting sweaty while using it, especially if you use a palm grip. On the top of the mouse is the Gravastar logo etched in the frame, as well as their name on the inner translucent plastic shell, which I actually want to talk about now. On the inside of the mouse is this cool looking dome, which I assume is to protect the internal components from getting any dust or liquids on them. But it also just covers them, considering seeing a motherboard in your mouse, especially when the case is so open like that, it could be pretty ugly. Along with the components under it, there are also a few RGB lights which look great because of the translucent dome, which diffuses the lighting really nicely. You can choose from a lot of lighting modes and presets in the Gravastar software, which all look pretty nice too. The RGB lighting also gets really bright, so bright that personally I find having a 2 to 10 brightness is enough. Just like most wireless mice with RGB, there's also a setting which lets you change how long it takes for the lighting to go off after not moving the mouse for a bit. This feature comes default at 30 seconds, I'm pretty sure, but for me personally, that was a bit too quick, so I keep it at 1 minute. But it can go all the way up to 40 minutes. The RGB lighting on the Mercury X Pro will also turn off when the mouse is actively moving, which I'm sure you can guess is to save some battery. My one gripe with this feature though is how the lighting just immediately cuts off when you start moving it and it doesn't fade out or in. I don't really notice it much, but when I do, it is pretty noticeable. But I do wish the lighting would fade in and out when you're moving it. Either way, there is a toggle for this feature in the software, which lets you turn it off if you want to. But with everything I said, I do much rather the feature being on. Moving to the front of the mouse is a USB-C port which charges the 450 mAh battery at 5 watts, which can charge the battery really quickly. Battery life on the Mercury X Pro is also extremely good. I've been using it as my main mouse for almost a month now, and I've only needed to charge it really 1 or 2 times, which is quite impressive. The main switch covers are a really comfortable shape, and they both have designs on them. The left one has some words saying Game Beyond Limits, as well as a small X printed on it. And the right cover has a large X and Pro in the middle of it. I personally think these prints make the mouse actually look better, and it's quite impressive that they got them to not look tacky. Under the covers are extremely clicky switches which don't have any mushiness or creaking to them. I don't really have much to say about them because overall they're just great and I don't have any complaints about the switches or the covers. The scroll wheel on the Mercury X Pro is alright. It's a bit taller than most mice that I've seen, and it does have a pretty comfortable texture on it. The one thing that I don't love about it is that it's not very tactile. What I mean by that is when I'm slowly scrolling with it, sometimes it doesn't like snap into the next spot. It kind of gets like stuck in the middle, which can mess me up pretty bad in games. It doesn't necessarily get stuck, but there's points where I push it and I'm like, yeah, that has to have scrolled, but it doesn't because I'm like a centimeter away from getting to the point where it actually activates. Over my time using it, I have kind of adapted to that, and it isn't really a problem anymore, but when I first got it, it was kind of annoying. But either way, it's not really a deal breaker, it's just something I wanted you to know. Moving to the bottom of the mouse are 5 small skates made from plastic. They're very smooth with no scratching, and they've never got caught at all while using it on my pretty average mouse pad. With the weight of the mouse plus the really good feed on it, this thing glides really well across almost any surface. Right above the main sensor, which we'll talk about in a second, is a DPI toggle button which you can fully customize in the software. You can have up to 6 separate DPI stages, ranging from 50 DPI to 32,000 DPI, which I don't even know how you'd use that. Right above the DPI toggle is a switch to choose between using the Bluetooth mode, turning the mouse off and using it wired, or using the 2.4 GHz mode. The 2.4 GHz connection lets you have almost indistinguishable latency from being wired, while the Bluetooth mode is mostly used while just out and about or traveling. But considering the dongle isn't that big, whether you're traveling or not, you should probably be using it. Since I just mentioned the dongle, I do want to mention one thing that's kind of weird about it. I don't know why, maybe it's because of its shape or size, but the dongle only has a female USB-C side and not a male side, which means you can't just plug it into your computer. You have to use a cable, which they thankfully do include in the box, in between your computer and the dongle. Although the connection is super stable, so you can just put the cable and dongle behind your computer and it won't disconnect. Now let's talk about the sensor on the Mercury X Pro. The PAW3950 sensor on the Mercury X Pro is pretty incredible, having an 8,000 Hz pulling rate, which is crazy. And like I said earlier, it has almost indistinguishable latency from being wired, if not faster, coming in at 0.125 milliseconds. Usually with keyboards that are 8,000 Hz pulling rate, I mentioned how there's not really a big difference between 1,000 and 8,000, but with mice, you get a pretty big advantage having a higher pulling rate. The sensor also has a 32,000 DPI range like I mentioned earlier and has never lost tracking once. Throughout my time using the Mercury X Pro, I've really enjoyed it and it's been a great mouse. From the visuals to the performance, this thing is incredible and I think you'd like it too. But is it worth $140? That's up to you to decide. So whether you watch this video for entertainment or you're actually looking for a new mouse to buy, I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to see you in the next video.